Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where we break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 46, Cindergrove Revisited. This episode features a guest star, Chris Hardwick, the comedian, TV host, and founder of Nerdist, which at the time of this episode was basically a partner with Geek and Sundry. I think it was officially like a sister network. On a serious note, I would like to offer a disclaimer. As I mentioned at the end of the last episode, back in 2018 there was a Me Too allegation against Chris Hardwick, but considering that the accuser didn't identify him by name in her blog post, and other people linked him to the story, and he was briefly fired from everything, investigated, and rehired when nothing could be proven, but that's primarily because the accuser didn't want to participate in the investigation because she wasn't actually interested in reprisal. That's why she didn't name him in the first place. Look, it's clearly a complicated situation with some lingering question marks left over. There are still episodes of another actual play show with Matt Mercer and Chris Hardwick that are not online anymore, so clearly someone, at some point in that process, felt the situation was still murky. To be completely candid, I don't know the truth. None of us do. And I don't bring this up to trash Chris Hardwick. We're not going to discuss these accusations in any depth today because it's not the subject of this video, but it is worth this disclaimer. I am going to include clips of Chris Hardwick throughout the episode, and I have several positive things to say about his performance in this episode. Not completely uncritical, but some praise to give. Obviously, this is not in any way intended to excuse the sort of personal behavior he was accused of, and I certainly don't mean to imply that no one could justifiably feel that he caused them any harm or emotional distress, directly or indirectly. But I just wanted you to be aware of this topic in case it's a deal breaker for you for any reason. My philosophy is that I think we can and should learn whatever lessons we can from anyone, even potentially problematic people, because it helps avoid putting people on pedestals if we can demystify what makes them good at something. That's a core philosophy of my channel. But I can't draw that line for you as an individual. So if seeing him in this episode will put you off, or if you don't like the fact that I'm going to draw positive lessons from him, I understand if this video is not something you're going to be able to engage with or willing to watch, and that's okay. I think there are valuable lessons here, but again, my philosophy does not have to be yours. Now, with all that said, let's get on with the show. As the game opens, the group approaches the edge of the Cindergrove forest and find 2 zombies and 2 animated skeletons. This is strange considering there shouldn't be any undead being generated by an open rift to the fire plane.
At this point, Corin, his father and the head of the Shari, in your absence, puts his hand forth and goes,
I'm sorry, you're saying that you see, along the way, undead creatures.
There's something unnatural over in that direction. We should probably be the ones to investigate.
Right. Given the nature of the elemental presence here, we're going to have to probably divide and attack the central place from multiple positions. Otherwise, they're going to have too strong of a fire front at the edges of this border. Do you feel confident enough to handle your own sliver of this assault?
Is he serious?
Grog. I believe we can handle it, Corin.
So here's something we'll probably talk a lot more about on this channel, both in future episodes of Critical Role Demystified as the Chroma Conclave arc continues, and probably in other videos as well. But Matt is in a situation where, logically, there should be other powerful spellcasters on the scene. Realistically, not every druid would have died when Thordak burst out of the fire plane. Not only because they'd likely be skilled enough to survive, but also, if they're all dead, then it's not just a tragedy, not just a genocide, but it's potentially an apocalyptic event without Fire Ashari to further protect the Rift from future incursions. That might even make it necessary for Keyleth to stay and recruit more followers to join a new Fire Ashari tribe, which would derail Keyleth's storyline. So there have to be some Druid survivors. Additionally, Serkonos in particular needs to have survived because he's going to have some important exposition to share with Keyleth soon, though he doesn't get to do that in this episode. So there's a powerful Druid survivor because Serkonos is alive. Now, Matt also chose to bring some members of the Ashari to the scene as well, to help with the recovery effort, including Keyleth's father. Now, that's an odd choice, considering that Keyleth is meant to renew the connections between the tribes, so we're not meant to assume they have a lot of contact with each other. But again, realistically, if there were people with access to high-level druid magic, they'd be able to send out calls to each other for help in times like this. So to make the world feel plausible based on the level of magic established, the Ashari sent some folks to come help. That's more druids on the scene, including probably druids who are high enough level to traverse continents. But obviously, a few high-level magic users hanging out and helping the party would make all the upcoming fights a lot less tense, and make all the upcoming role-playing scenes a lot more complicated, as Matt would need to remember to include reactions from each of these NPCs. So he has Corin present a rationalization to split up. They need to attack the enemy forces from multiple sides as they close in on the portal. But what I especially like in this moment is that Taliesin has the same thought. As they're going to confront these animated corpses, he suggests that Vox Machina takes the lead. He's giving Matt an out to not let these NPCs take up air in the scene. I don't even know if Taliesin realizes he's doing that. Maybe he just suggests it because Vox Machina are a bunch of unstoppable superheroes, and Percy does not want to risk Sir Konos or Corin because they are both leaders of their respective tribes and they should not be on the front line for that reason. But either way, it helps explain why these high-level magic users might not tag along on every mission. But of course, logically, Vox Machina would want the assistance of magic users, and Vex asks about that, because realistically, you would. And Matt offers a really quick solution. 2 druids will keep an eye from the air. If Vox Machina needs help, Keyleth can set up a signal for a couple of reinforcements. It's a nice compromise between the rational strategy of making use of the magic users you have access to, and the needs of an RPG where the heroes need to be the ones to solve their own problems or the adventure just will not be satisfying. Also, Corin offers an interesting piece of advice. If the undead creatures look dangerous, don't engage, because they're not the goal. What an interesting note. I mean, he does acknowledge that if indeed there are zombies in the Cindergrove, the situation is much worse than he imagined, but why would he say don't engage with the zombies and skeletons? Well, the party tries to sneak close to the undead, but because Scanlan is still exhausted from inhaling volcanic gas at the end of the last episode, he botches a stealth check and draws a zombie's attention. Vax manages to take it out with a dagger, and then out from the forest charges a blue-scaled dragonborn.
Stop what you're doing! Stop it! What have you done? What have you fucking done? It wasn't hurting anybody! I don't understand it. Jesus Christ, these are not easy to make!
These are zombies, these are undead!
They were attacking us! They were attacking him!
These were in my employ!
Oh!
Well, you should keep a leash on them then!
That would be inhumane, wouldn't it?
They're not human!
Well, they were. That's very disrespectful of you. I don't appreciate it.
Are they pets? Are they friends? Where were
They're
you?
friend pets.
You have to be around, though,
Yes,
to keep an
well,
eye on them.
I know, but I've been traveling out here for a while, and so they provide a layer of protection. Certainly not great now. Now there were 4, now there's 3.
Well, listen, when we see these things without an owner around, we take them out. I'm sorry, it's pretty standard.
This can't be the first time this has happened.
It does happen quite a lot, actually. Yeah. Now that I think about it, it's probably a little bit on me.
So Chris Hardwick is playing a dragonborn necromancer. The zombies and skeletons are his. That's why Corin said not to engage the undead if they didn't have to. That was Matt communicating that to the party. But while the party was assessing the undead and attacking the nearest one, Chris Hardwick didn't say a word. He kept his poker face. That's genuinely impressive. I'll be talking more next year about what makes a good guest star in a D&D game. I've done it a few times, and I'd like to think I have some helpful advice. But honestly, in this situation, the way Chris handles the foreshadowing of his undead is really smart. He doesn't say a thing. Even though the party manages to kill one of his zombies, literally taking out one of the creatures that Chris's character needs to be at his most effective in the game, he doesn't betray any opinion on it or hint that he knows what's going on with the undead at all. It's just good gameplay. And then we meet him, and he's very much a joke character. Not surprising, Chris Hardwick is a comedian. They'd been riffing a lot before the game, and he especially has a very strong comedic rapport with Sam. They'll be bantering a lot throughout the episode. But he's got a goofy Irish accent, he's very disarming and seemingly out of place, and even his name is a joke. He's named Gern Blanston, which is a reference to an old Steve Martin comedy album, because of course, as we all know, Gern Blanston was Steve Martin's real name. We all knew that. I didn't know that before this episode.
You look exhausted.
He's just short. This volcano, do you live near here? This volcano really takes the piss out of you.
No, I don't live near here. I've been traveling. I'm a simple candle maker.
Oh. What are you doing on top of a volcano?
A volcano is nature's candle. What a stupid question.
You make candles, but you also make undead.
Yes, they're like people candles.
Can I insight and see if he's telling the truth?
Go for it.
Our lives are so bizarre now.
Gern Blanston makes candles. Magic candles. Tragedy candles, as they wind up being nicknamed. He's here to scrounge up supplies for his candles, which somehow seems to be connected to the dragon's arrival. More on that later. But it actually kind of works out that they killed one of Gern Blanston's protective zombies, because that offers Gern a decent justification to tag along with the group.
Well, maybe you could just kill someone else and then I could just bring them back. I mean, that would be a wonderful way to repay.
Well, you know what? We're on our way to do just
Stick
that
around.
thing.
Really?
Things do tend to die around us a lot.
Sometimes larger things, sometimes smaller things.
Would you
might
like
even-
a body to reanimate or something?
You might get something even bigger.
Are you inviting me to come along with you?
I don't know, are we?
Did I just invite myself to come along with you? Listen, seeing as how that you've killed one of my undead thralls, it'd be really nice if I could join you to see if maybe we can scrounge up some other things along the way.
And
I
you'll
don't
help
see why,
us.
yeah.
I mean, we'll see how it pans out, but I feel like everything would come to an abrupt ending if I just walked away at this point.
It'd be very strange.
Thoroughly unsatisfying for anyone else who might be witnessing this exchange.
Again, I talk about this a lot when I create characters on this channel, but it's especially tricky with guest characters. There needs to be a justification for your character to tag along with the heroes, otherwise, why'd you come over to play D&D with them? And a lot of the time, we assume that the GM will take care of that, and often they do. But it's always nice when the players pick up the slack and start providing rationalizations for everybody to hang out together for a while. His zombies are named Carol and Coral, which are a reference to the Walking Dead TV show since he hosts the after show Talking Dead. Coral is his way of describing the bizarre way that Rick Grimes said the name Carl. If you didn't watch that show, that may seem like nonsense to you, but trust me, it makes perfect sense. And the skeletons are named Stimpy and Fatty Arbuckle. Carol the zombie is the one that Vax decapitated. Matt also points out that Gern does not have a tail, and the only other dragonborn they've ever seen without a tail is Topher Batoris from the Tal'Dorei Council. So we have a strange contradiction here. We're in a dangerous scenario with a lot of emotional significance for Keyleth, but we also have a very goofy guest character. Every time he talks, he makes the party laugh, not just because he's delivering jokes or responding as someone who is frankly taking this entire dangerous situation in stride, but even his accent to self is disarming and breaks the tension.
Purple hearts, green stars.
Purple hearts.
Yeah, he's seen some shit.
No lie, I think about that joke once a month. It's one of my favorites. But while he might be a joke character, he's also being played in a really smart way to make sure his goals logically line up with those of the rest of the party. And as we saw from his silence when they assaulted his zombie thrall, right now he's being very respectful of the others and not taking agency from them, which is really good player behavior. You're going to see a lot of clips of Chris Hardwick doing a goofy voice, but honestly, for a ton of this episode, especially at the beginning, he's just sitting silently, listening, and giving the others his attention. The party sees some fire elementals in the forest, along with a salamander, the fire-themed D&D monster, not the real-world amphibious creature. Keyleth becomes a fire elemental and approaches them, and because she can understand Ignan in this form, she overhears the salamander say, "He's not here yet." So somebody's coming to town, and it ain't Santa Claus. They think Keyleth is just a rogue fire elemental, and they go to tame her or whatever, but she rolls a natural 20 persuasion and commands them, with her authority over the material plane, to return to the fire plane. They ask again if she serves him, but she just pulls rank and sends them back home.
It doesn't matter who I serve, for I am above him. I am your master now. This is not your realm. Get back into the fire plane where you came from.
She still fumbles over her words slightly, but considering how we just saw Keyleth struggle to command Galdrick in the last episode, the fact that she was able to get this natural 20 is kind of a huge accomplishment, even though it is just a random roll. And even though I personally really dislike Matt's practice of explaining failed checks as a failure on the part of the player, like I think a failed stealth check should not mean the player sucks at stealth, if instead it could just be explained as bad luck, since it was literally bad luck, it was just a die roll. But because Matt describes failures that way, it stands to reason that successes would work the same way. And thanks to that mindset, I do think Marisha is able to use this natural 20 as a big moment for Keyleth, as she's able to, at least briefly, step into the role that she's been assigned for years, and that's a big deal for her journey. And I think that's really interesting. The fact that Matt allows this encounter to be completely bypassed by a single persuasion check is buck wild. Normally, that would not be something I'd endorse in your games. Bypassing combat with multiple rolls is fine, but a single roll? Isn't that bad D&D? Well, in this case, it acts as a demonstration of what Keyleth has learned and allows her to inhabit her destiny, at least for a moment. And also, maybe Matt saw that this game is going to have a lot of goofy banter, and they're probably going to run a little bit long, so he just cut this encounter for time. That actually might be the real reason. At this point, Matt calls for Chris to make a sleight of hand check. Right before that, Matt looked down and seemed to read something. My guess is that this was a text from Chris. Matt also calls for Vex to make a perception check. We've discussed this before, back when the dragons attacked, but sometimes Matt allows Vex to be the only one to make the perception checks because she has the highest passive perception. But also I think because he knows that Laura will be the first to ask if they see something. She is the most prone to FOMO. She rolls well enough to beat Gern's sleight of hand, but Gern was not pickpocketing anybody in the group. He was picking something up off of the ground and pocketing it, but she can't tell what it was. Anyway, they see the fire Ashari send up a signal from somewhere else in the forest, and they send up a flare of their own. They close in on the portal where a few salamanders and a few fire elementals are lingering and preparing for something. Gern gives an ice storm candle to the skeleton, Fatty Arbuckle. Fatty walks up to the salamanders and breaks the candle, and a blizzard briefly bursts forth and does some damage to the skeletons. Vox Machina charges in, and it's initiative, so here are the highlights. Fatty Arbuckle somehow survived a sword attack and the ice storm, and the first enemies that attack him somehow miss, so Bafflingly, this skeleton lasts longer than anybody expected, but he does eventually go down when he gets caught in the blast of Gern's Cone of Cold, which does freeze solid the 3 salamanders. Keyleth is still in fire elemental form, and she's able to intimidate another fire elemental to retreat, and Scanlan is able to finish off the last ones with a thunder wave. Something cool that Matt does throughout this fight is narrate a lot of the party's actions from the perspective of Gern, who does not know these characters yet.
And you watch at the corner of your eye as well, Gern. You see this tiny little gnome step to the side, conjure some arcane kind of purplish blue energy, and then thrust his pelvis forward as a bolt of lightning energy just rockets forth, tearing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
So you watch as this muscle-bound Goliath comes leaping around the corner as it affixes a chain to the edge of its weapon, flinging a 2-handed sword like a giant boomerang. Woof, 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 and
Only 14.
We caught a bit of this behavior a couple of episodes ago in episode 44, when Matt recapped Vex's death for Vax when he was out of the room. But here we see it again. Matt is just trying to be really good about remembering what the player characters would and would not know. And a nice side effect of that is that it helps immerse the guest player a bit better, since it would be very easy for him to feel out of the loop as he just overhears the shorthand of this group. Now, they're not right at the portal yet. Matt specifically described the portal as being a bit beyond the battle map, but they are close enough to see a creature emerge from the portal with a column of ash instead of legs, and a bunch of other salamanders around as well. The other Ashari are not here yet. It sounds like they are still in combat, and Matt actually implies that they got here first because they avoided another encounter because of Keyleth's powerful speech. I mean, I have a guess that they always would have been the first to the center because it's just not as much fun to have other allies on the field slowing down initiative, but the fact that they bypassed an entire encounter does really help justify this. Anyway, once again, it's initiative, so here are some highlights. But before we actually get to initiative, let's talk about the way Matt Mercer collects initiative. He gives number ranges, 25 to 20, 20 to 15, 15 to 10, 10 to 5, and so on. The players respond with their numbers in the initiative range, doing their best to give the answers in the correct order within that range. And in theory, this system helps Matt write down the names in the correct order. And I hate this. I hate this. It sucks and I hate it. And this is an episode where we see exactly why.
10 to 5.
8.
8 for Grog. Scanlan, what's your...
10.
Oh.
Sorry, 10. 10.
So that would be just below you, Percy.
Yeah.
All right, so...
I'm 7, by the way.
Oh, 7. I thought I got you.
Listen, it would be totally disingenuous to imply nobody ever gets missed in any other initiative system. But when Matt does this, it is so easy for somebody to miss their number range, or for Matt to not hear someone's answer, or for him to get two people's names mixed up. And because people answer in ranges, he still has to figure out who is acting in what order if multiple people are in the same range. And with 7 players, multiple players will always be in the same range and might not give their answers in the correct order, so it's not saving him that much work. Now, in fairness, the cast is pretty good about that, because they tend to be good listeners. But mistakes can still happen, and in my opinion, they happen really easily in this method. Now, I've said before on my channel that Matt's initiative system makes no sense, and a bunch of people replied, well, what do you want him to do? Just have everybody give their numbers in any order, and then he has to write them down with his best guess for what order they're going to land in? No? Look, I've been in games where everyone just shouts out their numbers, and that sucks too. But there's a secret third option. Print out a list of numbers, from 25 to -5, and just go down the line, go around the table and ask everyone for their total, and then add their name to the list where their initiative would land. It's just so much easier. If you've got someone you know rolls higher, like how Percy can roll as high as a 28 if he rolls a natural 20, then just add a few numbers to the top of the list. Have it go up to 30. Using a pre-written form also allows you to pre-roll initiative a lot easier. You can add layer actions. You can make notes of things that are going to happen on specific rounds. This is a new version of the form that I use. It's a cleaner version of the one I usually use, and it's going to be on my Patreon for free. The link's in the description. Just use this. It's so much simpler. Jesus Christ. Matt, you're the most famous living dungeon master in the world. You are a master of your craft. You are so good at D&D. Just print out a fucking list of numbers and stop doing your much worse initiative range system. I promise this is easier. Now, a funny thing about Matt's system is that the cast, especially Travis, will also record initiative along with Matt. I don't know if they were doing that at this point in the campaign, but if they haven't yet, they will pretty soon in our watch-along. So, if your players do that, just give them copies of the form. Let them write initiative the same way. This is just such a bad system, and I think you could do so much better at your own tables. Anyway, let's dig into the highlights of this encounter. The figure who emerged from the portal with the column of ash in the place of legs is an Ifrit, a fire genie. Scanlan casts Odaluk's resilient sphere on the Ifrit, trapping him in an impenetrable magic ball. Gern casts another cold spell, which turns the lava into a surface that they can walk on to get closer to their foes, but Matt keeps narrating that the lava is cracking and starting to heat up, so they can't stay planted in place for very long. This is another example of how much more movement matters the more elaborate their battle maps become. It's really cool. Keyleth casts Tidal Wave, and Matt has to make a ruling, because he now needs to decide how many gallons of water are in a tidal wave.
Okay, I'd say for that tidal wave, how many gallons of water would we say each one of those? I say
It's 30 foot tall. It's a 30 foot
Well,
tall.
it's 10 foot tall, 10 foot wide. 10
and
foot tall, 10 foot wide. So that's
30 feet long.
that's like
4 gallons, easily.
I'd say we're looking at like close to 50 gallons of water, right?
Probably way
Probably
more
more.
than
A lot of
50
gallons.
gallons.
A lot of gallons for sure.
I think it's like 1 million
It'd
gallons.
be like enough totally.
Somewhere
to
between 50 and a
put
million.
that
Somewhere between
fire
50
out.
and
Guys, why did we
Okay.
switch to metric?
It would be a few hundred gallons of water.
We'll say for the purposes of this.
How many
each-
deciliters of water?
I know. for the width of it and the space you had to pass it through, we'll say roughly 60 gallons of water passes through each of these elementals.
Okay.
Water susceptibility. For every 5 feet the elemental moves in water, or for every gallon of water splashed on it, it takes 1 point of cold damage. So they both take an additional 60 points of damage.
Oh, shit!
Which destroys both of the elementals.
Do that again, Keely! I will.
Oh, and then by the time she casts it again, somebody has tweeted at them with the correct total number of gallons based on the size of the tidal wave. 225 gallons. Now, not all those gallons would go through the same fire elemental because of the width of the tidal wave, but even just a fraction of that would be a hell of a lot of damage. So yeah, just so you're aware, tidal waves are fire elemental kryptonite. They're actually why I changed the fire prince in my Princess of the Apocalypse game into an ancient red dragon instead of a giant fire elemental. I had 4 druids in my party. You can imagine how many tidal waves my villain would face. But even before Matt knew how many gallons it would be, he had already selected a number of gallons that he knew would finish off these fire elementals because it made sense and it fit the moment. So he was willing to kill off his monsters instantly because it was a really smart use of a spell. Speaking of smart uses of spells, Matt looks up Odiluke's Resilient Sphere and realizes, yeah, no, his genie is out of commission for as long as the spell continues. So he rewards Scanlan's quick thinking by describing the genie blasting fire ineffectually against the walls of the sphere and silently shouting at them. It's a nice way to highlight that, yeah, they did completely screw over Matt's fight, but there's some fun to be found there. You don't want it to happen in every encounter, but when it does happen, it's sometimes good to just take it on the chin and just tell your players, yeah, what you did is cool and awesome, enjoy the moment. Now, at this point in the combat, the table is getting kind of manic. Not only are the fire elementals dying in droves and his main boss is trapped in a hamster ball, but also Chris Hardwick is starting to play music on his phone tangentially related to whatever's going on. Villain caught in a ball, Chris plays the theme song for The Prisoner. The zombies dance in place, Chris plays Thriller. So here's some advice for players. This can be really distracting. Now, it's fine in the right session and in the right group. And believe me, I've been the player who pulls out his phone and plays an audio clip of something I thought was relevant. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I think the music matches the mood of the table, but I also think it distracts Matt a bit and the other players a lot, so my recommendation would be to not do it as many times as Chris Hardwick does here. Once per session, maybe 30 seconds, that's fine, that's plenty, that is enough time to get the joke. The fact that Chris does this so many times in the back half of this episode really drags the episode down, in my opinion. It doesn't just show that Chris is distracted, it distracts everybody at the table. Laura tries to use her bonus action to hide, but she's one level of rogue away from having that ability. So she tries to use her skirmisher stealth feature to hide, but because that's not really how it works, she's not really able to do that. But neither she nor Matt are sure of that in this moment, so Matt just says, go ahead and roll for stealth, we'll correct it later if need be, but I'd rather you have fun than not. Because it's a game. And Laura really wants to be playing a stealth character, but as we've discussed before, the 5e Ranger is really murky at achieving any core fantasy, especially in these early days of the edition. She really should have multiclassed into Rogue much earlier in order to accomplish the goals of her character, but since they did not know the system yet, they didn't know that. This is the tension that really plagues Vex. The mechanics just do not serve her well for almost half the campaign. Of course, Vex has another problem, one that is slightly less connected to her mechanics. She really likes to fly. She loved the flying carpet, and she loved having the flying potion when they fought the Briarwoods. And so when the battle is over, and there's only an Ifrit and a ball left, and Gern hops on a flying broom he's got and starts pushing the orb around, well, Laura's eyes go wide. She didn't know flying brooms were a thing in D&D, and if she did, she probably would have tried to go find one of those instead of mourning the flying carpet as badly as she did. Grog and Gern try pushing the genie's orb into the portal, but they're not able to do so before the spell ends and the genie is free. And thanks to a really bad acrobatics roll, Gern is on his back in the lava, hanging onto his flying broom. Vex offers to help Gern out of the lava and offers to hold the broom as Gern casts a spell on the Ifrit, despite Sam starting to warn Gern not to hand over his broom, but then he stops himself. Okay, I guess, go ahead. And then, as Vox Machina unloads on this one target and Scanlan blasts it into smithereens with lightning, Vex sneaks the broom into the bag of holding and lies to Gern and says that the broom went into the lava. Now let's pause here a moment. because the internet lost their shit when this happened. Laura Bailey was inundated with hate messages about how you never steal from another party member. It is simply not done. Hashtag Broomgate was a whole thing, and it still hangs over Critical Role's head. This moment is infamous. And as much as I hate wading into years-old internet controversies, you know that I'm going to do it if I think there's a lesson that we can learn for our games, and there are some useful lessons here. This is a nuanced discussion. We are going to talk about this from a lot of different angles, but I want to start with the backlash against Laura about how you never steal from another party member. In response to those comments, I want to say, what fucking D&D games have you been playing? Listen, if your group has a policy from session 0 where nobody steals from each other, okay, fair enough. That's probably a good rule, actually. And Gern is a guest character. That's a whole other facet of this that we'll discuss in a moment. But to pretend that nobody in the history of D&D has ever stolen from another party member, like, are you high? Half the games I've played in or run have included a moment where somebody stole from another party member. Sometimes it was for plot reasons, other times it was just for shits and giggles. Sometimes it was done by a problematic player, and other times it was not. Now, you might feel like it's gross behavior, and that is fair enough. We're going to discuss this more. But let's not pretend this is outrageous behavior that nobody has ever heard of in D&D. That is just ridiculous. That being said, let's genuinely discuss this. Is it okay to steal from another party member? I think it depends why you're doing it, and we'll talk more about the why of this a bit more in a minute. But it is worth pointing out that Chris Hardwick is a guest at the table. And I am sure that there is an argument that it is worse to steal from a guest character, and that is an argument that I can absolutely understand. But I think there's a variable here. What is the role of a guest at your table? As in, are the guests at the table here to uplift the core cast? Or is everyone at the table trying to uplift the guests and give them the best D&D experience they can? I played at both types of games. And while you always need to show your guests respect no matter what, I know when I'm a guest, I don't think anything about my character is sacred. Whatever happens to me is fine because I'm a guest. I've literally been stolen from as a guest character. My party rogue stole my coin purse, but I didn't care because, like, what was my character going to do with that gold when he left the table and ceased to exist? But I'm also a game master, so of course my priority is the success and fun of the other players. We saw the same mentality with Will Wheaton in his episodes. He said that he was more than prepared to sacrifice himself because he thinks of himself more as a game master. So as long as it moves the story forward, he was fine with it. After all, he wasn't going to be there after the second game anyway, so what did it matter to him what happened to him? He's a guest. I also think this answer depends a lot on whether the guest is new to the game or not. Like, if somebody has never played D&D before, then I kind of think you owe it to that player to have the kind of game where you uplift them and give them the best experience possible. But if they've got some games under their belt and they're willing to play a support character, then yeah, they might feel like whatever happens to their character doesn't really matter that much. Now, that does not make stealing from them more or less okay automatically, because not every experienced D&D player is automatically the kind of player who's cool with you taking their stuff. But this is something that I think is relevant to consider, even if it does not fully answer the core question about the broom. Now, coming back to this example, how does Chris Hardwick feel about it in the moment? It's hard to say. He asks to make a perception check to notice the theft, and he fails that check. But then when Vex lies about the broom going into the lava, Chris is able to switch into performer mode and react in a very healthy way. He yes-ands the moment.
No.
Oh no! Oh no!
What is it?
Your broom fell in the lava!
What?
I saw it!
I just turned around for
I
a
tried
moment.
to give it back to you and it fell in the lava!
You sure?
Yeah!
Where's
Okay.
my fucking broom?
Make an insight check now.
Insight 13.
13. She's telling the truth, man. That broom just went straight in the
You're a
lava.
horrible person.
You know, I'm really good at reading people, and I know that you're telling me the truth right now.
So sorry!
No, I feel your sorrow. I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel bad for you that
I
you have
feel
to
bad that you
experience
had to-
that. It's just a broom. Right, it's just a flying broom that's very difficult to find. No big deal.
I wouldn't know. I don't even
That's
know.
all right. You know, it sterilized me, actually. I'm quite glad. It has very dirty properties.
Oh,
Anyone that would put it between their legs to fly around would be in horrible danger. Horrible danger. So it's actually probably for the
Communicable
better.
diseases?
Yes, so many STDs.
Listen, whether or not Chris Hardwick was okay with the broom being stolen in the moment, he played along, which was awesome. Good for him. But he also then started talking about how it was diseased and gross, so is he frustrated or just joking? At the end of the episode, he says it's fine, but is that true? It's impossible to tell with any confidence, and we could speculate endlessly and keep circling back to it and gain nothing. In another Q&A a few months later, Matt said that during character creation, the moment Chris selected the flying broom as a magic item that he would buy with his funds, Matt knew that Laura would want it if she found out that he had it. And sure enough, she did. And in that Q&A, Matt described that Chris Hardwick was still jokingly bent out of shape about it. So honestly, this may be one of those jokes that's funny because it's true and he's actually like a little bit frustrated about this, or maybe he's just giving her a hard time about it because it's funny and he's a comedian, and both of those are equally likely options. But this is a situation where, in my games, I found that the best practice is to describe what you're going to do and basically say, out loud, are you all okay if the story goes this way, if my character steals from this other player character? Give the players a chance to react before you actually say it and make it canon. The more you can communicate in advance, the better off everyone will be. I found that most players actually are so much more likely to go along with something if they know what's about to happen, because now they know you're thinking about the action as a role player and not as a problem player, and giving them the option to say no offers them trust, which they might return by saying, sure, go for it. Of course, the rule I live my life by is that you should not ask a question if you're not ready to get any answer, even no. So if the other player says no, that's gotta be okay too. Now there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's alignment. And I know this is going to give more ammunition to the people who think that alignment is bad in every form, but actually, once again, the issue here is just poor communication. So here's what happened. After this episode, Matt bumped Vex's alignment from neutral good to chaotic neutral. Now he later, and I mean way later, at the end of the campaign, he later explained to the audience that it was not just because of this one action, it was because of a pattern of behavior. And specifically, it was not because that she stole this broom and lied about it. It was because any justifications Vex or Laura might have given about the virtues of having a broom of flying would all be rationalizations after the fact. The truth was, she just wanted to fly, and that goal was clearly more important than somebody else's rights to his property. Now that's all very well argued, and Laura kind of, even in the moment, begrudgingly admitted that was true in this Q&A. But Matt also said that he didn't view this alignment change as a punishment. And I love Matt Mercer, but he's wrong. Like, sorry, he's just wrong. Because Laura did feel it was a punishment. She did not sign off on this alignment change, and while I could spend a lot of time speculating on that, I can actually prove it. I won't show the clip because it's a spoiler, but in about a dozen episodes, there's going to be a mechanical detriment due to Vex no longer being good aligned. And careful viewers can overhear her telling Liam that she doesn't think she should be chaotic neutral. Now, this is just about a misalignment of expectations. Matt has said that he feels alignment should be descriptive rather than prescriptive, aka your alignment does not dictate your actions, but instead your actions dictate your alignment. So in his head, okay, if somebody's pattern of behavior and or a major action they take does not match their written alignment, they'll just change what's on their character sheet to match that behavior. No problem. But he picked the alignment he felt Vex should be now, and Laura doesn't seem to have signed off on that change. And far, far later in the campaign, very mild spoilers with absolutely no details, but spoilers nonetheless, so jump here if you don't want to know the future of Vex's alignment. But a moment will come when Vex will do a really, really good deed and put others before herself, and Matt will literally reward her by mid-session, live, on camera, saying her alignment is going back to neutral good. He says that she's been trending in that direction for a while, but this moment is what cemented it for him. And the joy in Laura's face says it all. This is what she's been hoping for like 30 episodes. So I don't know, with all that in mind, how can it not feel like a punishment when you take something away without their approval, and then you reward their good behavior by giving that thing back to them? And again, this is just a communication issue. And for me, that is a way bigger issue than whether or not Laura stole an item from a guest player, because it messes with the player's agency and screws with how they perceive their character. I am so careful whenever I discuss alignment with my players, even when I'm a player discussing it with my fellow players, because I never want to be in a situation where I'm telling someone else how they should play their character and whether they're doing it right. I don't want to tell them that they have to change something about their character when I don't know how they feel about that thing. I don't know how much it matters to them. And while I agree with Matt that stealing the broom and lying about it purely because you want to fly does not feel like it lines up with someone who is neutral good, if the player doesn't have the same feeling about alignment that you do, you gotta be really careful about how you discuss the topic, because otherwise, as we see from this example, it can lead to resentment about this issue that lingers for several sessions. Now, the broom will be discussed by the party for many, many episodes to come, but there are also likely a lot more aspects of this topic that I haven't considered or at least haven't covered, so let me know in the comments if there's something major of this topic that I've missed, some big aspect of the debate that you'd like me to address in the future. And please, let's be respectful. Something I've learned as a Critical Role YouTuber is that while the Marisha hate is infamous and overwhelming, there's also a lot of Laura hate out there. And when people just whine about how much she sucks and they don't like her, that's not really the kind of comment that I tend to engage with in good faith all that often. Regardless of how you feel, it's a game, they're playing make-believe, so let's discuss this like adults. Anyway, at this point in the game, the portal is pulsing and flickering as more creatures are preparing to cross through, but other Ashari roll up to help close the rift. Matt calls for a ritual, much like their resurrection rituals, where 3 people can try to help close the rift. Gern uses a blink candle, which casts the spell blink and therefore uses planar magic, to help reduce the size of the portal. Interestingly, aside from Matt offering Gern an Arcana check to justify Matt reminding him that the blank candle might work, there's no roll required to accomplish this. Gern loses a zombie and a major candle to the effort, so that seems to be enough. And I like that. Sometimes it's not about rolls, and I'm fine with the players spending a significant resource instead. Keyleth casts Plane Shift on the portal, and she has to roll an Arcana check to channel the spell into the portal, and she succeeds and it shrinks down again. Finally, Vax takes the Cape of the Montebank, which allows him to cast Dimension Door, and basically jumps onto the portal and covers it with the cape in an attempt to use the teleportation magic to finish closing the gateway. Matt starts by asking for an acrobatics check, and then follows up with a straight-up wisdom check to try to trigger the magic item at the right moment. He rolls a 13, which is apparently enough, but of course he lands in the lava and they have to fish him out right away so he doesn't melt. But the rift is closed. Corrin and the Arashari will stick around to help rebuild, and I can almost guarantee that Corrin does that to absolve Keyleth of the feeling that she also has to hang out and help. That is Matt doing that to make sure that Keyleth does not feel the guilt to stick around. Corrin also tells Keyleth that there will be lots of sadness and loss, like what happened here, but that those moments of sadness help make the moments of joy mean more. Corrin, and Matt, is giving Keyleth permission to not dwell on every failure and actually celebrate her successes. And if you know Keyleth, you know that is a very tall order. It's worth a try, though. We also learn that the Arashari will be at her back if she ever comes home to call on them for help, and that might be useful if they have a huge boss they need to fight, like a red dragon or something. I don't know. That might be what Keyleth was asking about that. At this point, Chris starts playing Don't You by Simple Minds. It's the song from the end of the Breakfast Club. I mean, I personally like the music that Matt chooses, so maybe this was not the time, but read the room is not always useful advice. So again, just try not to play music this often or for this long. It can be distracting. Gern stays in Pyra to scrounge candle-making materials, and at this point, Matt reveals to Vex, thanks to her high passive perception, and also probably because dragons are her favorite enemy, that would work too, but she notices that the forest floor is littered with dragon scales. That's what Gern came here to scavenge. That's what he picked up earlier with his sleight of hand check. And in the final moments of this episode, we get a little bit of clarity.
Do you collect dragon scales for your candles?
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I've sold out my own kind because I was enslaved by dragons who had tails, who consider themselves royalty and therefore better than me, and I don't have a tail. And so I spent my whole life trying to figure out how to turn scales into weaponized candles. Anyway, gotta go. Everyone have a great time.
Now, obviously, you hope your backstory is going to be a bit more relevant during the course of a session, but you never know if you are going to have a chance to share it or whether it'll matter. And of course, Chris and Matt were being a little bit cagey about what Gern was looking for, so they were not exactly making it easy for Vox Machina to just know everything about his character. But this moment is interesting just because it is a very funny lore drop, but also because this backstory is hugely important to the context of Draconia. The party had no idea why Tiberius was so immediately hostile towards Topher Bratoris, calling her a peasant. Well, this is why. Tiberius had a tail, and Topher did not. Gern now gives us the context for why their dynamic was as strained as it was. Now here's something funny. When I talked about episode 21, I praised the way Kasha laid out his backstory for the characters, but someone in the comments pointed out that, it's a little unrealistic for someone to lay out their entire backstory like that. And while I think that is probably true, that is just sort of a necessary evil that a lot of us have gotten used to in D&D. Like, players want to share their backstories because they think that their character is cool. And I think the process of sharing backstories can also signify the progression of trust within the party. But here, getting this blast of backstory all at once would be pretty bizarre, which is why it's played as a joke. At this point, Chris Hardwick gets up and starts picking up random crap on the set to simulate how he's picking up scales. And while Scanlan asks Keyleth a bit about her homeland because he's missing a lot of the context because Sam actually missed the first Fire Ashari game, and Laura and Travis discuss giving Gern some dragon scales from the bag of holding, Chris is being pretty goofy and he delivers a bunch of really funny final lines, things that do a good job of putting a button on the scene rather than just having it trail off, which is the way the scene is currently going otherwise. So Matt actually calls the game there. And that's the end of the session. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 47, The Family Business. We get some wonderful fallout from this episode, including a very important lore drop and some major developments with one of their ongoing quests. But more on that in 2 weeks. If you want to see me take the series weekly, support me on Patreon. Once we reach 1,000 paid patrons, even if you only support at $1 a month, that helps me get enough steady money to hire an editor and speed up my process on these videos, because they take a lot of time to make. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, join my Discord, sign up for my newsletter, and follow me on Twitch. All those links are in the doobly-doo below. For more of my hot takes about initiative, check out this video here about the psychology of initiative. Until next time, play fair and have fun.